Former Liberal Heritage Minister Steven Guilbeault says his department doesn't track how much of its funding to the Canadian Anti-Hate Network went to Antifa or how it ensures that public funds don't go to such groups.
U.S. conservative commentator Glenn Beck, as well as Canadian war veteran Kelsi Sheren, are attempting to save a Saskatchewan woman who signed up for euthanasia after Canada's healthcare system failed her.
Political activist Yves Engler has been barred from running in the NDP leadership race after the party accused him of anti-Semitism stemming from his past social media remarks. Hello Canada, it's Thursday, December 11th, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Isaac Lamoureux.
And I'm Geoff Knight.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. Former Liberal Heritage Minister Steven Guilbeault revealed that his department, quote, doesn't capture how much of the over $700,000 given to the Canadian Anti-Hate Network went to, quote, Antifa or other extremist groups, or what guardrails it puts in place to ensure tax dollars aren't, quote, funneled to such groups. In response to an order paper question submitted by Conservative MP David Bexty on how the nearly $1 million in federal tax funds given to the organization by both the Ministries of Public Safety and Canadian Heritage is spent, Guilbeault revealed that the department doesn't track the taxpayer funds after awarding grants. In 2022, a small claims court judge accepted evidence that CAHN, quote, did in fact assist Antifa and concluded that Antifa, quote, has been violent. CAHN has disputed the ruling and was not a participant in the legal proceeding. A subsequent appeal of the ruling filed by CAHN board member Richard Warman in 2024 was dismissed by the Ontario Superior Court Justice Divisional Court. CAHN, which describes itself as, quote, proudly anti-fascist, denies allegations that its organization has ever supported terrorism, violence, or criminality. The term Antifa is used by its proponents to mean anti-fascist. In his response, Guilbeault noted that Canadian Heritage approved $708,400 for the group for containing and countering Canadian hate groups. To Bexty's question on how much of the funding was funneled to Antifa and other extremist groups, and how the ministry ensures the money is not used to fund Antifa cells, Guilbeault responded saying, the information requested is not captured in the Department of Canadian Heritage's tracking systems. So, Geoff, what was the Canadian Anti-Hate Network's response to this?
Well, Isaac, the Canadian Anti-Hate Network responded to the funding questions and Guilbeault's admission by firmly rejecting the premise that anti-fascist groups equate to extremist ones, calling it 100% false. In a statement, the Anti-Hate Network emphasized that it has never reallocated public funds outside the terms of our funding agreements and receives clean audits while using the grants totaling $708,400 from Canadian Heritage for containing and countering Canadian hate groups, to investigate and educate about far-right movements and groups which harbor racism and hate and are incompatible with a multicultural democracy. They described allegations of funneling money to Antifa or extremism as defamatory, denying any support for terrorism, violence, or criminality. Regarding the court rulings, the Anti-Hate Network disputed the 2022 small claims court decision that found it did in fact assist Antifa and concluded Antifa has been violent, noting the organization was not a participant in the proceeding. CAHN board member Richard Warman's 2024 appeal was dismissed by the Ontario Superior Court of Justice Divisional Court, but CAHN maintained its proudly anti-fascist stance without endorsing violence. Overall, CAHN framed the scrutiny as baseless attacks on its anti-racism work, insisting all activities comply with funding terms. American commentator Glenn Beck has offered to pay for a Canadian woman's surgery after she sought assisted suicide because she could not find a surgeon to treat her rare but treatable illness within her provincial healthcare system. In response to a CBC report detailing the case of Jolene Van Alstyne, who suffers from a rare thyroid disorder, Beck blasted the Canadian euthanasia program on X on Tuesday, offering to pay for the surgery himself. He also spoke about the program on his show.
Doctors are the third largest killer in Canada. Is that a problem for anybody? They're just devaluing life. And honestly, this is what happens when you get socialized medicine.
He said, quote, "If there is any surgeon in America who can do this, I'll pay for this patient to come down here for treatment. This is the reality of compassionate, progressive healthcare. Canada must end this insanity, and Americans can never let it spread here. An hour later, he posted an update saying he was trying to contact Van Alstyne and that surgeons had already offered to perform the procedure. By Wednesday, Beck released an additional update saying that because Van Alstyne lacks a passport, he's contacted, quote, Trump's State Department, and that officials are, quote, aware of the urgent life-saving need, and that he had a, quote, positive call with the administration. The article said Van Alstyne would need to go out of province for the surgery, but she first needed a referral from an endocrinologist. However, none are accepting new patients. She told the CBC the pain had become so unbearable that she applied for assisted suicide, with her appointment scheduled for January 7th of next year. Beck is not the only one reaching out to save Van Alstyne's life. Kelsi Sheren, a combat veteran and euthanasia prevention advocate, has started her own campaign to raise funds or otherwise help Van Alstyne find the care she needs in Canada. Sharon posted a video on X calling out Canadians to help on Tuesday.
We can actually help somebody here, but they're not doing that. They're actually giving her MAID on January 7th. 7th? I think it's the 7th or the 9th of 2026. I want to stop this. I want to get this woman into an endocrinologist, but I need your guys' help to do it. She's in Saskatchewan. It's already a small spot, but if there's a doctor or somebody in Canada or in America that would be willing to refer and help this woman get the surgery and save her life, I would be eternally grateful. This is what these platforms are for.
So Isaac, what are critics of Canada's assisted suicide program saying about Jolene Van Alstyne's case?
Yeah, Geoff. So critics say Jolene Van Alstyne's situation has become one of the clearest examples yet of how Canada's assisted suicide system is being used as a pressure valve for a collapsing healthcare system instead of a last resort option for the terminally ill. They argue the problem isn't just that MAID is available, it's that it has become easier to access than the medical treatment that would allow Canadians like Van Alstyne to live. Observers like Kelsi Sheren, who you mentioned, described the case as a, quote, quiet violence of neglect, noting that Van Alstyne isn't terminal, untreatable, or beyond medical help. She simply can't get a referral. Because there are no endocrinologists accepting new patients, meaning the healthcare system functionally shut the door on her before MAID even entered the picture. Sheren warns that this creates a form of structural coercion, writing that choice becomes meaningless when your options are slow agony or assisted death. In her view, this isn't empowerment, it's coercion with a friendly tone. Several critics point out that Van Alstyne's case mirrors a growing pattern. People with disabilities, chronic pain patients, homeless Canadians, and even military veterans have sought MAID not because they want to die, but because they can't access the services that would allow them to live with dignity or without pain. As Sheren put it, Canada is becoming a nation outsourcing its failures to death. What has shocked many Canadians is the contrast between how quickly MAID was approved for Van Alstyne and how impossible it was for her to obtain a standard medical referral. And I went through Glenn Beck's X posts, which were filled with negative replies from Canadians, some providing their own examples with others expressing disgust. For example, one user said, quote, "Give her refugee status. Her life is in danger in Canada." Another said, quote, "Thank you at Glenn Beck from all Canadians. You're not only helping save a woman's life, but shining light on the issue of government MAID programs where they have plenty of appointments for MAID, but zero for life-saving surgeries. Disgusting." And another user broke down several issues. They said, quote, "We have a healthcare system that is so backlogged that we're offering MAID to people on wait lists. To get treatment, you have to go outside our system because you can't buy healthcare services legally. To go outside our system, you have to get a passport to leave the country, but you can't get a passport quickly, even in a life or death emergency. To get a passport quickly, you have to have someone higher up to intervene and bypass yet another broken system." And I'll highlight one more post from the thousands of replies that gave personal examples and negative feedback. The user said, quote, "God bless you, Glenn. As a Canadian who lost his grandfather too soon because he died while on a waiting list, free healthcare, this resonates strongly with me. My father recently had to spend 8 hours in emergency to be seen by a doctor. The waiting room was packed with people who can't speak English, figure that one out, only to be immediately sent home with zero treatment. The next morning, we had to call an ambulance because of his worsening condition." So in general, critics highlighted the core issue that MAID is expanding faster than Canada's ability or willingness to provide care that would prevent suffering in the first place. And until those systematic failures are acknowledged and fixed, cases like Jolene Van Alstyne's will continue to surface not because Canadians want assisted death, but because they feel abandoned by the system meant to keep them alive. The socialist NDP has booted far-left activist and author Eve Engler from its leadership race, citing a mix of claims including alleged harassment, confrontational behavior, and most recently, claiming his foreign policy views align with Russian and anti-Semitic narratives. Engler, who sought to replace Jagmeet Singh as party leader, was informed late last month that his application had been denied after a review by the party's leadership vote committee. Internal correspondence between Engler and the party, reviewed by the Globe and Mail, shows the committee upheld its decision after Engler appealed. In its rejection, the committee cited comments by Engler that were, quote, consistent with anti-Semitic rhetoric, his use of the term, quote, Holocaust industry to denigrate remembrance efforts, and his views mirroring what the party called Russian propaganda about the war in Ukraine. The party also cited concerns that he had expressed sympathy for Syria's Assad government and had repeatedly confronted MPs in public and private settings. Engler denied the allegations in an interview, saying he has condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine and anti-Semitism, quote, on dozens of occasions. He said the party's decision subverts members' ability to choose their leader. On Wednesday, Engler escalated his criticism, calling the party's decision, quote, Orwellian, in a lengthy statement posted to X. He argued the NDP had misrepresented his positions on international law and solidarity with marginalized groups, and accused the party of ignoring Canada's own history of supporting coups and foreign interventions. So, Geoff, if the decision to bar Engler from the NDP leadership race is held, what could that mean for an already weak NDP party?
Yeah, Isaac, the decision to bar Eve Engler from the NDP leadership race could deepen the party's existing problems for sure and risk a real fracture on the left. The NDP is already at its weakest point in decades. They've only got 7 seats. I mean, no official party status and polling in the low teens. Excluding a vocal far-left figure like Engler, whose base is concentrated in urban progressive ridings, this sends a clear signal that the party is unwilling to tolerate strong pro-Palestinian or anti-imperialist voices. That's going to anger young activists and the members who will see the move as censorship, not protection against anti-Semitism. A schism is possible. Some supporters may simply disengage. Others could drift to the Greens or even independent socialist candidates in future. The party is unlikely to lose a massive chunk of its remaining voters overnight, but it will make it harder to rebuild enthusiasm on the left, especially in Quebec and BC, where the NDP is already struggling. For Mark Carney's Liberals, a quieter NDP is quietly convenient. A divided or demoralized left means less pressure from the flank on issues like Gaza, housing, or climate, allowing Carney to govern from the center without constant threats of non-confidence. In short, the big winner from this mess is probably the Liberal minority government, not the NDP renewal.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.